I noticed a trend online recently. The phrase, "I debate politics. I don't debate human rights." It sounds noble at first, but it also reminded me of a blog post I've read before. I can tolerate anything but the outgroup. It exists because a friend of the author once said to him, "I can tolerate anything but intolerance." But the more he thought about it, the more intolerance started to sound like people I disagree with. Oh, and by the way, human rights kind of are debatable. Hello there. Let's talk about politics.
Basket of deplorables.
Protecting the reproductive rights of binders full of women.
Healthcare is a human right.
Housing as a human right.
Sport is a human right.
If someone wants you to have less rights and freedoms, then how is that person your family member?
I can believe that you are ignorant, or I can believe that you are evil.
But before we get started, this one's going to be pretty dark, so I'm going to turn the lights on. Today we're going to go over two things. First, the blog post, and then second, human rights and their debatability. The question here is, what do we debate? But first, what do we tolerate? Let's wind the clock back to 2014. We're only on our second Hunger Games movie. Wine moms everywhere have just discovered Pharrell Williams' Happy, and Brendan Eich, the inventor of JavaScript, has just been named CEO of Mozilla, the Firefox company. It came out that Eich had donated to California's Prop 8, an amendment that would recognize only heterosexual marriages, limiting same-sex couples to only domestic partnerships. For context, only 1 year prior, Barack Obama had won his second term. The Supreme Court had just overturned the Defense of Marriage Act as unconstitutional, and this photograph was taken. Public pressure mounted, and Eich resigned. Our author, Scott Alexander, is a psychologist in the Bay Area and a prominent writer in the rationalist community. So like I said before, the article that this phrase reminds me of was written back in 2014, and it exists because when a friend of mine heard Eich got fired, she didn't see anything wrong with it. "I can tolerate anything except intolerance," she said. Let's break that down a bit. I can tolerate anything. Humans come with all sorts of different shapes, sizes, colors, smells, and brains. But one thing those brains have in common is that we're pretty tribal. Not only are we inclined to form our own groups, we're inclined to form our own outgroups. The phrase, "I can tolerate anything," seems to imply that the speaker has overcome their innate sense of tribalism. Except intolerance takes it a step further. This speaker virtuously tolerates outgroups and makes that outgrouping behavior their enemy. Okay, Squee, I'm filming. The praising of outgroups is interestingly counter to human nature. It represents overcoming our tribal tendencies and placing our moral virtues first. And our author might have believed it too, if it wasn't for Osama bin Laden and Margaret Thatcher. The worst reaction I've ever gotten to a blog post was when I wrote about the death of Osama bin Laden. I've written all sorts of stuff about race and gender and politics and whatever, but that was the worst. I didn't come out and say I was happy he was dead, but some people interpreted it that way. And there followed a bunch of comments and emails and Facebook messages about how could I possibly be happy about the death of another human being, even if he was a bad person. Everyone, even Osama, is a human being, and we should never rejoice in the death of a fellow man. One commenter came out and said, "I'm surprised at your reaction. As far as people I casually stalk on the internet, you are the first out of the intelligent, reasoned, and thoughtful group to be uncomplicatedly happy about this development, and not to be, say, disgusted at the reactions of the other 90% or so." This commenter was right. Of the intelligent, reasoned, and thoughtful people I knew, the overwhelming emotion was conspicuous disgust that other people could be happy about his death. I hastily backtracked and said I wasn't happy per se, just surprised and relieved that all of this was finally behind us. And I genuinely believed that day that I had found some unexpected good in people. that everyone I knew was so humane and compassionate that they were unable to rejoice even in the death of someone who hated them and everything they stood for. Then a few years later, Margaret Thatcher died. And on my Facebook wall, made of these same intelligent, reasoned, and thoughtful people, the most common response was to quote some portion of the song, "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead." Another popular response was to link the videos of British people spontaneously throwing parties in the street with comments like, "I wish I was there so I could join in," from this exact same group of people. Not a single expression of disgust or a, "come on guys, we're all human beings here." I gently pointed this out at the time and mostly got a bunch of, "yeah, so what?" combined with links to an article claiming that the demand for respectful silence in the wake of a public figure's death is not only just misguided, but dangerous. And that was when something clicked for me. So how could it be that Thatcher had earned condemnation, but Osama did not? I thought these people had virtuously overcome their tribal tendencies, their urge to celebrate the death of their enemy. They didn't. Bin Laden just wasn't their enemy. Let's talk about two things: outgroups and tolerance. So what makes an outgroup? We all know the popular ones, race, religion, sexuality, but the strongest is creed. The strength of the urge to outgroup people based on belief systems is far stronger than the other ones, at least recorded in psychological studies. Now, the author doesn't, and I also don't suggest that it implies that any one group has it worse or better than another in this context. So the author talks about all of this and then opens a section with a description of dark matter. The theories that there's a lot of mass unaccounted for, something like 50% plus, and it's all around us all the time, and we can't see it and we don't interact with it. That's kind of how the author feels about conservatives. At the time the article was written, about 46% of Americans were creationists. Not in the sense of believing God helped guide evolution. I mean, they think evolution is a vile atheist lie and God created humans exactly as they exist right now. That's half the country. And I don't know a single one of these people in my social circle. The author goes on to cite that it's not because he's deliberately avoiding them, it's just that the chance of that being random is statistically near zero. That means that our cultural in-grouping and out-grouping is very strong at play in keeping these groups separate and from interacting with each other. So if we're trying to figure out what the most prevalent out-groups in America are, undeniably, the blue and red tribe, the political left and right, play a huge role. The author's description of the tribes was too funny to not share, so I'm going to read a few of them out for you. The red tribe is most classically typified by conservative political beliefs, strong evangelical religious beliefs, creationism, opposing gay marriage, owning guns, eating steak, drinking Coca-Cola, driving SUVs, watching lots of TV, enjoying American football, getting conspicuously upset about terrorists and commies, marrying early, divorcing early, shouting USA is #1, and listening to country music. The blue tribe is most classically typified by liberal political beliefs, vague agnosticism, supporting gay rights, thinking guns are barbaric, eating arugula, drinking fancy bottled water, driving Priuses, reading lots of books, being highly educated, mocking American football, feeling vaguely like they should like soccer but never really being able to get into it, getting conspicuously upset about sexists and bigots, marrying later, constantly pointing out how much more civilized European countries are than America, and listening to everything except country. And there is a partly formed attempt to spin off a gray tribe, typified by libertarian political beliefs, Dawkins-style atheism, vague annoyance at the question that gay rights even comes up, eating paleo, drinking Soylent, calling rides on Uber, reading lots of blogs, calling American football sports ball, and getting conspicuously upset about the war on drugs in the NSA, and listening to Filk. So remember, that was all written back in 2014, so some of that still holds. I mean, obviously the red tribe has been classified as America, American things, and the blue tribe has managed to separate itself from America, especially when it comes to like feeling superior to their red tribe counterparts and the parts of American culture that they're not so into. The gray tribe at the time of writing was less formed, less populated, and, like he said, virtually indistinguishable from the blue tribe. Needless to say, I feel that the gray tribe now contains a decent swathe of blue to red tribe counterparts / expatriates. And after the most recent election, I think a lot of gray tribe people now fit in better with the right than they did before. I really like those descriptions of the three tribes. I feel like the author's using the gray tribe to refer to internet weirdos that I think I fall into the category of. The reason I bring up the gray tribe at all here is so that I can be clear that it's like an attempt at accountability for myself. I do want to be clear that this is not, by any means, a noble act of self-criticism. I am not a member of the blue tribe, and thus I gain no virtue points by being critical of it. Furthermore, I should be very cautious about how much fun I have with my criticism, because this is a video about tolerance and being gracious with each other. Oh, and thank you for noticing. Yes, I did get a haircut in the middle of filming. I am the pinnacle of professionalism. But moving on from the tribes, the author uses two very good stories to illustrate the points of tolerance, forgiveness, and where we derive our virtue from. In Chesterson's The Secret of Father Brown, a beloved nobleman who murdered his good-for-nothing brother in a duel 30 years ago returns to his hometown racked by guilt. All the townspeople want to forgive him immediately, and they mock the titular priest for only being willing to give a measured forgiveness, conditional on penance and self-reflection. They lecture the priest on the virtues of charity and compassion. Later, it comes out that the beloved nobleman did not, in fact, kill his good-for-nothing brother. The good-for-nothing brother killed the beloved nobleman and stole his identity. Now the townspeople want to see him lynched or burned alive, and it is only the priest who consistently offers a measured forgiveness conditional on penance and self-reflection. The priest tells them, "It seems to me that you only pardon the sins that you don't really think sinful. You only forgive criminals when they commit what you don't regard as crimes, but rather as conventions. You forgive a conventional duel just as you forgive a conventional divorce. You forgive because there isn't anything to be forgiven. Actual forgiveness, the kind the priest needs to cultivate for evildoers, is really, really hard. The fake forgiveness the townspeople use to forgive the people they like is really easy. So they get to boast not only of their forgiving nature, but of how much nicer they are than those mean old priests who find forgiveness difficult and want penance along with it." After some thought, I agree with Chesterson's point. There are a lot of people who say, "I forgive you," when they mean no harm done. And a lot of people who say, "That was unforgivable," when they mean that was genuinely really bad. I think it's fair to say that you can only earn the right to call yourself forgiving if you forgive things that genuinely hurt you. That story beautifully illustrates forgiveness. Now on to tolerance. I believe this is a retelling of a Buddhist parable, and there's a hyperlink that demonstrates that to us. Or I suppose it could be Taoist, I'm not sure. Regardless, the emperor summons before him Bodhidharma? And asks, "Master, I have been tolerant of innumerable gays, lesbians, bisexuals, asexuals, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, transgender people, and Jews. How many virtue points have I earned for my meritorious deeds?" And Bodhidharma answers, "None at all." The emperor, somewhat put out, demands to know why. Bodhidharma asks, "Well, what do you think of gay people?" The emperor answers, "What do you think I am, some kind of homophobic bigot? Of course I have nothing against gay people." Bodhidharma answers, "Thus, do you gain no merit by tolerating them?" And of course, there's the more recent example of the South Park episode. You tolerate a crying baby on a plane, that sort of thing. Morals matter most when they're tested. Virtue is earned when we stand to gain something by betraying it. Forgiveness and tolerance follow the same pattern. For forgiveness to be truly a virtuous act, we have to actually believe that there's something to be forgiven, something harmful. Furthermore, tolerance doesn't mean anything if we don't have an issue with the thing we're supposedly tolerating. You know, if someone boasts their tolerance of differing political opinions, does that count for political opinions that fall outside the sphere of what they consider acceptable? Or is it really just I'm tolerant of the ideas that don't actually offend me all that much? As the author puts it, real tolerance makes your blood boil. The whole situation's very reminiscent of the Crony Beliefs article from Kevin Simler. A lot of these behaviors are these tribal political chameleon things that we do to garner favor with each other. The popular name for it is virtue signaling. It goes a lot deeper than just an intentional political clout grab. It's baked into the way our brains function. We try to preserve ourselves and ingratiate ourselves with our tribes, and do so by signaling, buddy, this cat. What are you doing? You gonna try that bathroom door again, huh? You wouldn't do anything so cool while you were on camera. Oh, you would only do it when you were conveniently out of frame, huh? I would recommend reading this in its entirety. You know, once again, it's a genuinely visceral experience to work your way all the way through this. When this one hooks you. And the roller coaster ends with the author admitting that he knows that this was a political punch. It's a jab at the Blue Tribe for managing to jettison somehow all of their other outgroup hatreds so that they're very focused on only outgroup hatred at the Red Tribe, and any behavior that one might consider like attempting to dunk on your political opponent or your political outgroup is exactly the type of behavior that this article warns against. If you have fun talking down to someone, if you have fun trying to prove someone wrong in a debate, they're probably a member of an ideological outgroup to you. Like I said, virtues matter most when they're the hardest. Tolerance matters most when it is genuinely challenging, when it is a member of an outgroup. In the author's own words, the worst thing that could happen to this post is to have it used as convenient feces to fling at the Blue Tribe whenever feces are necessary. Which, given what has happened to my last couple of posts along these lines, and the obvious biases of my own subconscious, I already expect it will be. But the best thing that could happen to this post is that it makes a lot of people, especially myself, figure out how to be more tolerant. Not in the, of course I'm tolerant, why shouldn't I be, sense of the emperor in the example before, part 1 in his writing, but in the sense of being tolerant makes me see red, makes me sweat blood, but darn it, I'm going to be tolerant anyway. That's the message. That's the takeaway, and it's beautiful. We have tribal outgroups all around us and a ever-broadening sphere of opportunities via the internet to get into arguments with them. The best thing that we can all do at those moments when we are at our angriest with our perceived enemy, practice difficult, teeth-gritting tolerance. And I can hear the knee-jerks already. How could I ever be tolerant of intolerance? How could I ever be tolerant of Tribe A because they're gonna hurt me and my friends? See, as you might expect, this article generated some of the best back and forths I've ever seen in any comment section ever, and I'm gonna read one of them. User A, self-identified as Blue Tribe, gave very genuine acknowledgement of some of the points and raised valid concern. People with Red Tribe politics usually favor policies which directly harm or limit the well-being of people who are gay, non-Christian, non-white, or non-male. So basically, I know that people with Red Tribe political beliefs want to directly harm me and my friends. I see no virtue in tolerating them. User B. I don't think tolerating people implies condoning their views. In quotes, I think you're wrong about XYZ, and I'm going to reiterate that when it seems germane, but I still enjoy your company, is distinct from both Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and get thee from my sight, heretic. User A. Oh, I totally get that. What I'm saying is that I consider it reasonable to treat people who want to actively harm me or my friends as enemies. User C. And likewise from the other side, saying that you only hate the other tribe because they threaten you and they started it doesn't make your tribalism different. It's bog standard tribalism. And the last response from user C particularly stood out to me, because I think this is a common defense we all do. So back to the phrase that started this video, I debate politics, I don't debate human rights. I think we can see why that rhymes with I can tolerate anything but intolerance. Human rights here seems like subconsciously coded language for the red tribe, all over again. The first sentence suggests civility, tolerance of differences of opinion. And the second, a brave and virtuous stand against bigotry and bullying that upon further inspection looks a lot like I don't debate the other tribe because they threaten me and my friends and they started it. Bog standard tribalism. So now I've shown why this reminded me of the blog post, but this statement also clearly suggests that there's something that is beyond the pale. Something that's not up for debate. Basic human rights. When I was in college, my politics professor asked me, what is the origin of human rights? And I proudly and incorrectly answered the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, for those who aren't familiar, it serves as a foundation to the limits of power on the king, and it came from the peasantry. So, in my mind, that kind of initiates like a codification of the people have some rights or something, and the king shouldn't mistreat them, and that authority comes from them. Now I don't really think that's a suitable answer at all, because if you're going to go with that, you can pull that thread all the way back to something like the Code of Hammurabi. In reality, we don't really know where it would have started. Obviously, every religion has some sort of the way you're supposed to treat other people clause, but you might see where I'm going with this. If we're talking about the concept of basic human rights, where the f*** did they even come from? Starting chronologically is challenging, if not impossible. So let's go to what my professor was probably looking for as the correct answer, the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Adopted in 1948, it's considered the foundation of international human rights law and has inspired many legally binding treaties. So this document represents an agreement amongst all of the nations who signed it that there is a universal standard for treatment of a human being. Moving on to what it actually says, this codifies that all humans have an inalienable right to life, liberty, personal security, freedom from torture and slavery, equality before the law, freedom of opinion, expression, peaceful assembly, and religion. It also contains some economic and social rights, right to work, fair wage, to form and join trade unions, rest, leisure, education, participate in the cultural life of the community. And it also says that every human being everywhere has these rights without discrimination. 48 countries voted in favor at the origination. The 8 who abstained were Soviet states, roughly. I do want to make it clear that the point of this video is by no means to suggest that any one group's human rights are debatable, like that they can be removed or that they're optional or that they should be violated. That's not at all what this is about. I've thought for a while about how I wanted to make this qualifier, but I'm going to be real with you. I don't think it matters. I think that there will be zealots and sycophants who will never separate the human rights are debatable part from whatever their pet group is. They'll just assume that I'm some horrible enemy of theirs and I'm advocating for harming their friends and family or whatever. That's not true. I never will, never have, but I don't think that's a conversation I could ever win, nor do I really care to. If you're open to hearing my meta concern about the argument, this is the place for you. If the separation of the meta from the object is not something you're capable of doing or willing to do, which are functionally the same thing, then leave a nasty comment for the algorithm. This video is about us together discussing the weight of our words and the usage of them. The next step after suggesting that your enemy violated human rights may very well be justifiable violence. I'm not even saying that you're wrong, I'm just saying, hey, that's a really f***ing heavy accusation, and proceed with caution. That's really it. And I think all of us, blue, red, and gray tribe, can use examples like this to see when we do it ourselves. If that phrase resonates with you, I don't mean this video to be an attack on you. Think of it more as a friendly suggestion that the words that we use to express our frustration risk alienating potential allies and exacerbating tribal divides that only will serve to hurt us as time go on. But regardless, getting back to the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If we use that as our founding document, there's a few in there that make a lot of sense, but from the top, the source of where these rights come from isn't really discussed or established. We're starting on shaky ground yet again, but progressing to the next point. So, okay, if we can't establish where they come from, can we establish that they're inalienable? And the answer there is also somewhat no. These rights are obviously suspended in times of war. Sure, torture is still frowned upon, but many of the other rights can be freely discarded. Then, of course, as well, the rights of prisoners are suspended. How many of your basic human rights can be taken away if you lose them to be sent to jail? Liberty is obvious, but life, that's debated. There are places both with and without the death penalty. Furthermore, what crimes constitute valid justification for alienating one from their rights? A topic that is itself debatable. And even the Universal Declaration itself, it establishes a lot of things that don't really f***ing hold up. What do you mean we have a right to education? A state-sponsored education? Is there a syllabus? Like, is there a specific type of education we're all supposed to get? Like, what state's responsible for paying for it? And if they do so, where are the taxes supposed to come from? Like, right to travel to another country? Like, I understand the principle of just not stopping someone if they attempt to cross the border, but does one nation have to allow them in? Are all refuge claims valid? If it's an island nation, is it on the government to uphold their basic human rights by paying for transportation from the island? Like, this stuff is kind of out there. I think a lot of people would agree that it would be ridiculous to suggest like every island needs to have government-mandated ferries to take people off of it because we all have a right to not be stuck there. The concept of rights themselves are quite challenging to me, to be transparent. The idea that you can't even agree where they came from. We suspend them whenever we feel fit, like whenever we deem someone our enemy. Tell me, what the f*** is a right in the state of nature? Am I gonna argue with a stream that I have the right to a fish to not starve to death? We've confused the pleasant guardrails of society with nature itself. Is the cold unjust for depriving me of my right of not freezing to death? Rights are the agreed upon boundaries of the social contract. They were debatable at their very inception. Rights are just a fancy way that we say that we're not gonna f*** with each other. Somewhere along the line, we mixed up a bunch of nice-to-haves with the need-to-haves. And those agreements, these rights, like that is the fabric of society we're talking about. That is our shared commitment to cooperate rather than kill each other. Using human rights for political shit-flinging is as stupid as it is dangerous, because you justify their suspension for your outgroup. Furthermore, it's like, okay, what do you do when a basic human right's violated? Is it punished? Because it's not. Like, sure, we try to punish some war crimes, but it's f***ing selective at best. In North Korea, there are internment camps. In China, we buy smartphones from factories that have suicide nets around them. Mothers carry children in baskets on their back while they go to work in toxic cobalt mines in Africa. If a basic human right's violated, like what's the penalty? Do we bitch about it? Like, do we not buy the product that came as a result of it? The concept in the phrase is an opportunity to grandstand, and it's frustrating. It's a textbook political trick. We have historically debated human rights. We debated them at their inception. We debated them when they were ratified in the 40s. We debate how we enforce them when we deal with other countries. Standards and morals are ever changing, and these things will remain in the public discourse. The idea that you can paste a label on something and say it's suddenly no longer up for discussion because only bad people disagree with me is childish at best. It's textbook tribalism. If there was an easy answer, it would already be out there and it would be in use. There's not. People have legitimate concerns and legitimate grievances on both sides of the political aisle. Famously, Benjamin Franklin said no conflict would last long if with one side lay the right. Lied the right? Whatever. The road to hell is paved with cathartic condemnation, and the stairway to heaven is paved with unpleasant forgiveness. If you're still here and you haven't angrily clicked off, thank you. I really appreciate it. Maybe I'll actually get some of my first angry comments this time, huh? I really appreciate all of you who have watched and subscribed. Please continue to do so to help me figure this whole thing out. I want to continue putting together philosophy video essays like this. I usually wouldn't make them political, but actually, I'm lying. A lot of them are political. It'll sneak in a little bit, but I'll try to be as good faith an actor as I can be and as highbrow and like generally extend an olive branch to cooperate with everybody. I'm not interested in being a flinger. And on the off chance that Scott Alexander ever sees this, thank you a lot for your work. I greatly appreciate it. And I understand that at the top of the post you said, please keep this off of Reddit and other similar places. If this seems to you like one of those similar places that you were requesting your work to not be placed, let me know and I'll happily take it down. So thanks everybody for watching. That's all I've got for you this time.